Budget gyms. They're cheap, so they're very little risk. There seems to be one in every corner these days, so you probably don't have to travel very far to get to one. But there are downsides too. So who actually benefits from this model? That's the subject of today's video, so stay tuned. Well, greetings and thanks for joining me in yet another video in the series of videos discussing the pros and cons of joining a gym, all based on the original article put up on DCSfit.com, The Gym Paradox, the pros and cons of joining a gym. If you haven't seen that piece of content, as always, I will leave a link in the description below and you can go and check it out at your leisure. Just remember, it's a big long piece of content that is there for reference. It's not really something that's been designed to be read from start to finish. While you're down there checking out the link, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like, subscribe and notification bell, then that would really help the channel out, and I'm really keen for these videos to be seen by as many people as possible, just in case they're helpful. Now in this video, we're discussing budget gyms. So that obviously leads on from the last video, which if you've seen that, we were talking about the phrase cheap gyms near me. Well, cheap gyms are budget gyms. So obviously that's going to fall into this category. However, in all the previous videos and in the original piece of content, what I've tried to do is keep my own personal opinions out of the discussion. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that today because I do have strong opinions about this. So I will try and keep them to a minimum, and where they do creep in, I will try and to give the balanced view of my opinion, or alternatively, at least show where my opinion has come from. But we'll see how that goes as this progresses. But we're going to kick off by looking at the perceived positives of a budget gym membership. So obviously, when you join a budget gym, or if you're thinking about joining a budget gym, the first thing that's probably going to come to mind is the price. They're cheap. That's their big selling point. It is a cheap facility to go and join. You're probably talking about a maximum price here of about £20 a month, if even. Most of them are a little less than that, and some are significantly less than that. Now, again, in previous videos, I've tried not to mention any specific gyms. I think that's going to be difficult to do here, so we might as well rip the band-aid off this right now. We're talking about things like Pure Gym, Exercise for Less, the Gym Group. These are kind of the big three. There are some other ones that are out there, but some of them are not franchises that go from city to city, so you might not be aware of them, and some of them are sort of growing in the industry. I'm thinking about things like JD gyms, where they're fairly new to the kind of budget gym arena, so they're not quite as well known as a budget gym as the others, but it does seem to be pretty much the same model, very similar layouts, just a different color scheme. So yeah, we're talking about these ones, but those three are probably the ones that I'll refer back to an awful lot. And when you look at Exercise for Less, they are generally $9.99 a month. You do find some that are $14.99 a month, and it doesn't really go much higher than that. I think what they try and do is pitch themselves cheaper than Pure Gym. Pure Gym are kind of the bigger brand. I think they are the bigger company, as in their revenue is bigger, their turnover is bigger. They were certainly for 1 year the highest growing non-public company in the UK. And obviously the reason for that is because of the price. You're perceived to be getting an awful lot for very little money, but they do tend to be at the higher end of that scale. So you're talking about sort of low end of that being about the $14.95 mark and going up usually to sort of $17.95. But I've seen some that are sort of $19.95. So we are talking about £20 for them. The Gym Group, if you didn't know, is owned by Pure Gym. So it's the same company really, but they are still operated separately. So they have different models, even though they're quite similar. So, but they tend to be cheaper as well. They're more like the cheap alternative to Pure Gym, weirdly, even though we are talking about within the budget realm. But what that does kind of show is that we're talking about a race to the bottom here as far as price is concerned. There's only so far you can undercut one another until you just get to the bottom level. So when you get past the price, what else is there? Well, there's equipment, and there's a lot of it. There's an awful lot of equipment filling that gym floor. So that's obviously another good thing. If there's a lot of equipment and you're paying very little money, well, you get to access all this equipment. So that's bound to be a positive. And if you don't really know what it is that you're going to want out of the place yet, and you're just looking at different gyms, when you see a lot of equipment, it's probably going to make you start to think, well, okay, what I need is bound to be in there somewhere. I'm probably not going to use all of this, but the stuff I need is bound to be in that because there's an awful lot of stuff there. So it will probably sell to you or sell to your emotions that, yes, this is a good place for me to be. The other obvious one that I sort of mentioned in the intro was that they're springing up everywhere. There are so many of them that there's bound to be one that's local to you, particularly local to your place of work. They do tend to be in city centres, and if they're not in city centres, they might be next to or within a building that's got a hotel or an office block or something like that. So it means it's somewhere you can pop into quite easily. And that's bound to be a benefit. If you feel that you can just pop in on your lunch break, or you can pop in before work and then just go into work afterwards, then that's got to be a perceived benefit. Now, when it comes to perceived negatives, well, it depends on where you are in your mindset at the time. If you're just comparing gym after gym after gym, you might not perceive any of these as a negative. But one that quite commonly doesn't go over people's heads are the crowds. It's something that if you know anything about gyms, you're probably expecting crowds anyway. So this goes back to the thing of, if you're nervous about it, if you're nervous about the idea of investing in a place, you probably think all gyms are busy. And to a large extent, that's true. But there's busy and then there's busy, and they all have different models. And budget gyms certainly have a model that causes them to be a little busier than most of the more expensive facilities. So yes, crowds are a perceived negative before people go in. But when we go back to equipment, if you know anything about equipment, then you may well know that there is difference in quality, as there is with pretty much anything that's manufactured. So you can buy a barbell for £30 or £40, but you can also buy a barbell for £1,000. So there's a big range in the quality here. Now, some of that quality quite often at the top end is to do with fractions of weight and the quality of the bearings and those kind of things. And it's usually because if you want to do like a lifting competition or used in the Olympics, for example, you want the tolerances to be very, very small, like microscopically small, because what you can't have is someone who's competing against someone else, and when they go up to lift, they're using a different bar, and that bar is, even half a kilo different, because that could make all the difference in whether that person makes the lift or not. So that's why these tolerances exist at the high end of it. But when you start moving down the scale and you get into the sort of £200-300, you are talking about a much higher quality barbell than the ones that are at sort of like £30 or £40. Plus their longevity is much greater as well, because most of these bars, when you spend a bit more money on them, are designed to bend and then return. Whereas the cheaper ones, when they bend, they're bent. And if you've ever used one of these and been in when there's heavier trainers, people that are putting 200 kilos in the bar for a squat or something, and that bar bends on their back, if you try and use it afterwards, you're using this banana-shaped bar, which I have done, that doesn't sit in your hand properly. It doesn't sit in your back, and it suddenly becomes dangerous. So if you know your way around equipment, you might know that that's the case, and that could well be a perceived negative. But if you're not aware of that, well, now you potentially are. When it comes to the cardio equipment as well, there is a tendency for budget gyms, certainly historically, I don't know if this has changed in the last year or two, but I do know that for in the beginning, they were tending to buy a lot of semi-commercial quality equipment. Now, if you don't know how that works, a treadmill is not the same regardless of where it's going to be situated. There are home use treadmills, there are semi-commercial or light commercial treadmills, and there are commercial grade treadmills. And then within that, there's differences of quality and the sort of like the features that are on them. But these levels are based on how much their use intention is. So if you're getting something for your home, you're probably going to only use it once a day. and maybe someone else in your house will use it once a day, but it's certainly not getting used every hour of every day. When you get up to the top end, where you get to the commercial grade equipment, that is designed to almost be in perpetual use. It's designed to be used and abused, and the weight of the people that are using it can also be pretty high, because it's just designed to be, I'm not going to say bulletproof, but as close to it as you can get when you've got a lot of moving parts like that. The semi-commercial equipment quite often will have a weight tolerance on it, usually sitting around about sort of 110 kilos, there or thereabouts. You go above that, you're likely to break it. Also, it's not designed to be getting used as frequently. So it might, if you actually look at the manufacturer's guarantees on it, quite often it'll be saying that it's only supposed to be getting used 4, 5, 6 hours a day. So when we're talking about a commercial facility that's open 24 hours, which Pure Gym is, these things don't really weigh up. They don't equate. They're actually open more than a lot of the places that have got the commercial grade equipment. Their numbers are higher because they're cheaper, and they have to be, and yet they're buying equipment that is designed not to last as much as the commercial equipment. As I say, I don't know if that's changed recently, but I certainly know when I looked into this, even 2 or 3 years ago, that was the case. There was an awful lot of semi-commercial equipment being purchased for these places. So that's why another one of the perceived negatives when it comes to budget gyms, or certainly even if it's not perceived beforehand, it's usually very quickly put into people's heads that this is a negative, is walking in and seeing the out of order sign on far too many pieces of equipment, particularly the cardio equipment. Okay, so these are the perceptions you have before you join the gym. But who is this facility actually good for? It's going to be good for someone. They're really popular, so they should be good for an awful lot of people. But let's break it down category by category. Starting with beginners. If you're a beginner and you're looking for somewhere to train, I can see why budget gyms are appealing. The reason being, again, we go back to the price. You're not risking an awful lot, but we've covered that in the last video already. Cheap, quite often, just means cheap. It doesn't mean good value. Now, you can get good value out of it if what you need is a 24-hour gym and you want to be able to pop in there at 2 o'clock in the morning because that's when your shift finishes, or you've got a situation where I've spoken to taxi drivers and they've been in a situation where their shift might be that they're busy at night. They make the most of their income if they work at night when people are going to the pub, coming back from the pub, going to nightclubs and coming back from nightclubs. This is a big popular time for taxi drivers. But you've got that lull then, because after the pubs close, which is usually 11 o'clock or midnight, that kind of thing, depending on where you are, at midnight, you can't get into clubs usually beyond that point, so people aren't really going to them. The pubs are finished, but the clubs don't come out until 3, 4 a.m. So what do you do as a taxi driver in between times? Now, if you've got a membership to a 24-hour gym and you can just pop in there at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning and do a 45-minute workout before you get back into your taxi, go and pick up the people that are going home from clubs, and then you're finished for the night, you go home and get some sleep, then great. That's definitely a value to you. But if you're a beginner and you're going in at that time, do you know what you're doing? Is there going to be anyone there to show you what to do? I'm going to say in most cases, no. And quite often, the budget gyms are not 24 hours. So yes, Pure Gym is, but Exercise for Less, for example, isn't. So you're not going to be able to do that when it comes to there. So what are your advantages if it's not 24 hours, or if you don't need the 24-hour part of it, or if that's not going to fit well into how your day runs? Now, one thing I'd point out here is don't kid yourself. If you're a beginner and you think, I'm going to get round these crowds by going at 5 a.m, and you've never been up at 5 a.m. in your life, don't kid yourself that you're just suddenly going to be able to do it because you're driven to, because you'll probably do it for a day, maybe 2, and then it will just fall off the radar. Some people will do it and they'll be able to stick to it, and that's great. But more often than not, you are kidding yourself on. So don't use that as a reason. If you're going to go down that route, what I would suggest is prove to yourself you can get up at 5 a.m. Get up at 5 a.m. and do some press ups or go for a walk or something. Do something active at that time in the morning. And if you can keep it up for 2 weeks, then go and join the gym, because now it's a little more habitual and you know you can follow through on it. But don't pretend to yourself that that's what you're going to do going forward. Ultimately, what I'd say is I feel that budget gyms are probably the worst venue if you're a beginner. If you don't know what you're doing, there is probably no worse venue for you to go to. Yes, you're investing very, very little, but again, as we discussed in the last video, what you're immediately doing is devaluing the importance of this to you and your life. If you're not willing to pay a decent amount of money towards this, i.e. you're talking about you're not even willing to pay £1 a day to be able to go to a gym, because £30 is too much for you. You want the sub 20. You're not really taking it that seriously. Secondly, once you're in there, you might have been promised X, Y, and Z when it comes to the fact that there's classes that you can go to, or that you're going to get a program. The classes are likely to be incredibly busy, especially if they're any good. So, and I also know that in some of these models, some of the budget gyms will have it where there are 2 tiers of class. There's the entry level that you get as part of your membership, and then there's the premium classes that you have to pay more to go to. So you're already having to up the amount that you're paying out. So your perception is it's cheaper, but actually by the time you start paying for these more premium ones, if that's your thing, you might have been better going to another gym anyway, because they would have been included. So as a beginner, your starting point might be going to these classes. You might not be able to get into them, the quality might be low, and certainly they are not going to be designed with you in mind. So what you're getting out of it as a beginner is so little that what you're really getting is the fact that it's not costing you very much. That's the only benefit. And not costing very much for something that is not giving you what you paid for in the first place is of no benefit to you whatsoever. You would be much better advised looking for an alternative that is going to cover the specifics that you need, or spending a bit more money hiring a coach or a personal trainer to really go into detail about what you need at the beginning. And then you can taper that away, and now you're no longer a beginner. And now you can maybe look at saving money on the facility because you know what you're doing. But in the beginning, I would advise that it is a very, very bad choice, even though it is probably the audience that they appeal to the most because it's cheap. And the people that are going to pay that money probably have very little faith in themselves as to whether or not they're going to follow through on their commitments to make a change. When it comes to novices, what I'm talking about here are people that have been going to the gym for about 6 months to a year, that kind of thing. They know a bit. They've been around the block with their gym training, whether that be at home in another gym or whether or not they sort of started in a budget gym and they did manage to claw their way through the crowd and do well out of the facility. Then we get into another problem. And this is a problem that really is for another day for me to wax lyrical about. But too often when people have been training for a short period of time, they develop an ego or feel that they know more than they actually do.
One of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong.
Because they're doing quite well themselves and they've gone through the struggles, and now there are a few people appearing who are new to it, they feel like they are comparatively the expert. Now, there is some truth in the fact that as long as you know more than the other person, then you can always teach them something. But I think quite often what ends up happening is there is kind of a bravado that comes with it, where now that person feels that they want to talk as if they know more than they actually do. So quite often a good cue to this is the phrase, what you need to do is. Using that phrase is a big red flag to me. I'll still use it sometimes because it just does trip out of your mouth every now and again. But if that's commonly being used by people when they're saying, no, what you need to do is this, that is a big red flag. Walk away from that person. There's nothing you need to do. You are an adult. You can do whatever you want. If you're in a gym, you are an adult. Although we'll come back to that later on about like when people should start training. That's going to come in a future video. Now, where it can become helpful is that that person knows their way around. So they might know how to set up something. You know, like, how does a piece of equipment work? They can maybe show you, yeah, okay, you put the pin in here, this is how you adjust the seat, that kind of thing. That can be quite helpful. But what we're talking about here is whether or not the facility is good for someone who is in that novice area. The problem here is when you think you know more than you do, when you start to build that confidence and you get a little overconfident based on where your level actually is, then you start to see things and you start just throwing stuff into your programs and your training. And where that comes unstuck is I've seen this numerous times where people have seen things in magazines or they've seen things on YouTube and thought, I'm going to do that. Oh, that looks cool. I'm going to do that. It's not whether or not it's suitable for that person, whether they need it or not. The person in the video or in the magazine looks a way they would like to look, and they're showing an exercise and they're just going to jump on board of it. Nobody's ever assessed how they're doing it. They don't know if their form is good or not. And they're going to just jump into doing this kind of exercise. And because they're in the middle of a big crowd, it's really hard for anybody to be able to step in frequently and be able to say, sorry, what are you doing there? That's ridiculous. Your form's all over the place or you're not doing it properly. But where it also comes into play is if that person goes in with a plan, and usually by that point people are starting to write down programs and they're keeping a check on what they're doing, where their weights are going and all that kind of thing. And they walk in and they say, right, okay, today it's a leg day, I'm going to be squatting. And walk in and all the squat racks are being used. So what are they meant to do at that point? Well, it might well be that they've seen somewhere that, I don't know, like a hack squat. And I don't mean using the machine, I mean it's almost like a deadlift, so the bar's behind you and you're holding the bar behind your legs and you're squatting with the bar behind the line of your legs. That's going to be more quad dominant. So it's maybe more the equivalent of a front squat, for example. So maybe the person could do a front squat and they've read that they could do a hack squat instead. But I've seen people do hack squats when they've not been trained to do it. And the form is generally, I'd say 95% of the time, abysmal. The back starts to snake and the form goes and the pressure on the lower back is awful and it's just not doing what it's designed to do. But if you can't see yourself, you're not going to know that that's happening. And where are you going to see yourself from? You need to face a mirror, for example, then you're maybe not going to see the bend because you're looking straight on. If you try and turn sideways, now your head's off to the side, your posture is off anyway, even if you do manage to keep your back straight. So, and I'm only using that as an example. It's just one of these things that people might just start bouncing to do different things, feeling that they know what they're doing. Oh yeah, I'm going to go and do this today. And doing it with bravado. And they don't want to be seen to not really know what they're doing because they've been in for a while. Within a big crowd, that can become a thing. And it can certainly turn into showing off. Which can also then lead to doing things that are a bit crazy. You'll probably have seen the picture of the person, in fact I'll probably put it here, where somebody's trying to squat on a Swiss ball, where whether that was real or not, I'm not sure. I have seen people in history, my history of gyms, actually doing that for real. And whether or not they were doing it for a laugh or because they'd seen the picture, I've heard somebody say that they were doing it because they wanted to help their skiing and they wanted to help their balance. But, you know, there are other ways in life that it's an accident waiting to happen. But when you can't physically do the thing that you set out to do because it's too busy, you're much more prone to doing that kind of thing. And at the novice level, I think that is more likely. So I don't think novice is a level where you're really going to benefit from budget gyms. But what about if you're a bit more advanced? Okay, now this is where it sort of comes into its own. Advanced lifters, and I just mean by that anybody who's been training for maybe two or 3 years or more. I'm using that as advanced because by that point, hopefully they've got over the hurdle of the things that are hurting them or the crazy stuff, and they've started to realize what's working and what's not working, maybe taken a bit of advice over the years and they know what they're doing. that kind of person can do okay in a budget gym. Usually if it's a bit more advanced, you're taking it seriously as well. So then that person's maybe a bit more prone to the idea of getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to go and get the gym when it's a bit emptier. But similarly, if they're going into a crowd and you have a bit more of experience and knowledge of how to navigate that crowd, then they can go in with a kind of a more penciled plan that can be adapted and changed based on what's happening that day. They don't go in with preordained expectations of I must do X, Y, and Z or I'm not training. So they can navigate it a little bit better and they can make the most out of it. They'll also be a bit more savvy when it comes to hoarding the equipment. So you'll find that maybe somebody who is a bit more advanced and knows what's going to happen might get themselves in there before the big crowd arrives, grab a squat rack, grab a bench, grab a barbell, an EZ bar, and a couple of dumbbells that they're going to be needing in their program. They've got all the equipment they need and they hoard it in one area. And now they're good to go. Nobody can touch them. They're in an area that they know that they can do everything in, and until maybe they do some mobility stuff later on and they can just go and find a space for that. So that could well be the situation that they get the benefit out of it. But as I touched on in the last video, this is where my personal opinions come into this. And it's where I get really irritated with the model. What you're doing there is you're taking advantage. You're taking advantage of people who are paying and they're desperate to make a change. They were keen enough to go and say, I'm going to lay some money down here. I need to make some changes. But as we've already discussed, beginners are maybe not going to get very far when it comes to budget gyms. Certainly very few of them. I think a small percentage are actually going to make their way through the first few months that are going to get them to the point where they feel comfortable enough to cope in that facility. And then when they sort of go off boil, it's going to be hard to get back into again. So you're taking advantage of those people because they're paying to cover the overheads and everything else that allows you this facility. And that's down to the model. It's because the place is too busy, but it's cheap. So therefore it's selling to an awful lot of people. And keep in mind what I said at the beginning. If everybody turned up, the place would be unusable. It would be impossible to get into the building if everybody showed up. So you are relying on the idea that people do not, that at least half the people don't turn up. That's the only way you're getting to use this place. So yes, you might be getting an advantage out of it, but that I'm alright Jack mentality really, for me anyway, I feel is a disgraceful way to be using gyms. Because, yeah, you might be alright, but all these other people are not, and you're taking advantage of that. And you might well say that it's free will to them, they don't have to be members. But keep in mind, if they're not, if they go away, what's left? Your membership and the people at your level who are making the most of this place are not going to be sufficient in numbers to be able to keep the place afloat. And if all you get are people at your level who know what they're doing and feel that they can navigate the place, you're the type of person who turns up religiously 3, 4, 5, 7 times a week. You get to use the place because someone else is subsidizing you. If they go away, you cannot sustain that place. Or if people all jump in the way that I just said and it's all people at your level, you're not going to get in the building. So yeah, it might be great for you just now and you think, well, when it falls away, I'll go somewhere else. Is that really what's best for us as a society? And this is where I come back to kind of my ethos as to what fitness is supposed to be about. It's about us feeling better about ourselves. But aren't you going to feel better about yourself if you're in a society where people are generally happier, people are less kind of crappy to each other? Is that not a better place to be? And this is all part of it. So I implore you, if you're one of these people that think, well, I'm all right, think about the other people that it's affecting. Think about this model. If we continue to support this as a nation, then we're basically saying we're happy with this. We're happy the way things are. Keep doing it. Just keep doing it. We will all keep paying for it. If anybody out there that's watching this has got a membership to a gym, a budget gym, who hasn't been for 3 or 4 months, cancel your membership. It may feel like, well, I might use it next month or something. What you're doing is you're continuing to vote for this model, and it may be that if you stop it, the model might change. So it might well feel like what I'm saying is get rid of budget gyms, and the pushback I could feel is, well, what if we can't afford it? Well, I still feel that these are doing you a disservice. If you cannot afford it, you can't afford it. That's fine. You can't afford it, then you can do push-ups, you can do squats, you can go for a walk, you can makeshift your own equipment at home. It's possible to do stuff if you really want it. If you're making it so difficult for people to be able to use a facility because it's so cheap that they have to have the member base so high, we're causing our own problems. And I genuinely feel like this is I've used the phrase before, that budget gyms quite often are a cancer on the fitness industry. They are killing it because the fitness industry is here to be able to serve people. It is here to help people. If the model is designed to say that they're going to take money from people with the view that half of them are never going to get the advantages, and they can't, it's a physical impossibility for that model to work if everybody takes advantage of it, then we're not serving people. That is not what this industry is about. So don't say that you're part of the fitness industry then. Just say that you're duping people under the guise of the fitness industry. And that's really what it feels like it is. It might be benefiting some people, but it's hurting others. And it might be putting those people off, especially if they are at the position where they're at the beginning, they're dipping their toe in the water, and now they're put off. Those people might be put off for life. They had enthusiasm, they had drive for change, and now suddenly they don't want to do it anymore because they hated it. They hated the experience, and they're not even thinking about what the alternatives are. And then it's years down the line before they realise that, the diabetes has taken hold, or they're overweight to the point that they can't move around with any level of fluidity, can't keep up after your kids or your grandkids, all these kind of things. And then, only then, do they decide they need to do something about it. And now it's a doctor's referral, where they're seeing a physio, or they've decided to go to a yoga class or something else. There are alternatives out there, and we will discuss them in future videos. But please keep in mind that whatever level you are at, if you're at a level where it's not of value to you, don't vote for this by paying into it. If you're at a level where it is beneficial for you, keep in mind the people who you are essentially ripping off for your benefit in order to be able to make this thing happen for you. I think we'll leave that at that for today. It's something I could go on at for a long time because I'm very passionate about it. It's not that I'm not passionate about, or I don't believe in the concept of having a budget version of something that people can access. But when they're being duped by the marketing and the advertising, when they're being sold a false promise, that's where it really starts to get to me, because we are here as an industry to help people to make a difference. It's a business, and like any business, it has to make money. If you don't make money, you're not a business, and you can't survive, and you can't serve anyone then. So all businesses have to make money in order to be able to serve the right people. But when we're making it as a guise of we're supposed to be helping these people over here who can't afford it and don't really know what they're doing, and they're a bit scared and they're a bit nervous, but actually the people that it benefits the most are the people who don't need it. The people who could walk into any gym and they could pay a little bit more to go and do it because they realise the value of it, then we have a problem. And if you look back at the history of gyms and the way they were, when I started going to gyms, there were no budget gyms. There was a budget gym would be a council-run gym at that point. There was no sort of commercial model of a budget gym. A cheap gym would have been something that was somewhere in the region of about £40 a month. That was cheap at the time. We're talking about the what was Greens at the time, now Nuffield, LA Fitness, which I think is gone, Virgin Active and David Lloyd's, which are still going. These were more the kind of like the leisure centres really that are a high part of it is the gym model. You're really looking at the fact that was fine and people paid for that and most people didn't complain about it. And it's only because this other thing exists now that people start to think, well, why can't you be that price? But the reason is that this one over here has got 1 member per square foot. This one over here might have 1 person per square metre, for example, which still is a lot. It's still too many. But at least that way, there's a bit more feeling that if everybody was to turn up on the same day, as long as they spread themselves out evenly, everybody could get in and just about train. It's still a bit too reliant on the idea that people are not going to show up too regularly. There's going to be enough people that don't show up. So we'll leave that there for now. It's something really to think about. Obviously, I have strong opinions on it, but if you have different opinions, I'll meet you down there. Talk to me in the comments. I'm more than happy to discuss these things. I'm more than happy to be proven that I'm wrong. And as I say, I don't think that it's a bad thing for everyone. I just think that we should be thinking of the whole rather than just ourselves, especially when it comes to an industry that is here for the benefit and betterment of society, which the fitness industry is supposed to be. In the next video, we're going to be discussing how much a gym membership costs. It's one of the most common questions out there. I'll probably be mostly sticking to the UK, but we will discuss other countries as well. So until that next video, have a great week, stay awesome, be good to other people and think about other people, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.